In this video, we're going to be replacing the passenger side lower control arm, which is located in the fender well, connects the subframe to the actual knuckle. Let's remove the tire, 19mm socket for the lug nuts. Leave it partially on, so that way we can make sure that it comes off. There we go. So we're going to remove the axle nut. This has got a lock cotter pin in it. Pretty rusted, but we're going to take it off anyways. Worst case scenario, we'll have to drill out the hole because we are reusing the axle. And you're going to need a new cotter pin, which you should on any vehicle. They are really not, it's a one-time use, not reusable. So I sprayed it, as you can tell, trying to soak it up. And that is a good motion right there. So I got it to move. And let's see if we can get it to come out. That is one of the easiest ways to do that. Now we have to take this cover off, which is pretty corroded. You can use a screwdriver or a pry bar. I just really don't want to destroy it. And then there's always what they call a spring washer. And it's a spring washer because of the way it's designed. That puts pressure against that once that cotter pin's in. I'm going to spray that again. Let's see if we can get rid of some of this rust because we don't want to ruin this nut in the threads. .32mm axle socket. And it's rusty, that's why it's going to be hard to come on, but I guarantee you, once we're done using it, it'll come right off. Anytime you have rust, go back and forth. There it is. So now that the nut's off, we're going to take this little washer out. And don't forget to make sure you put that somewhere you're not going to forget to put it back on when you put the nut on. With a trim tool, we're going to take these two little clips out so we can access the lower bolt on this control arm. Now we're going to disconnect the ball joint to the knuckle pinch bolt, 18mm wrench, and 18mm socket on the other side. Don't be afraid that if it doesn't come out, to use a little punch and go right through the pinch bolt. Now I'm going to remove the vertical bolt back here that goes through what they call the hockey puck bushing. It's 21mm wrench on the top and then 21mm socket. Just going to give it a little tap from the top. So we're going to remove the undercarriage shield here, this plastic shield. It's held on with bolts that are 10mm socket. And the ones up front here. Now I'm just going to take a bungee cord. I'll put the hook right through. I'm going to bring it over to the other side and just hook it someplace safe. And that is all so that you can get to the last bolt holding the control arm in. This is the horizontal one, 21mm socket. There is no nut, it's a welded nut inside that subframe. So this is the worst part of the job, separating this ball joint from the knuckle. It gets pretty corroded in there, so I'm going to really try to loosen it up with the spray before I start hammering on it. So I'm going to use a pickle fork because the ball joint comes with the control arm, so if I damage the boot, it's not that big of a deal. So now I'm just going to put a cold chisel here where the split is on the knuckle, just to give it a little wedge. Help move it along. See if we can get any movement out of that. There it is. Remove the chisel. Wow, look at that. So before you replace your lower control arm and you have your new one, make sure you take the plastic cover off that is in there for shipping to protect that plastic boot. So I like to place the donut in the back end, the cookie, shall I say, a hockey puck. And then I'm just going to try to keep working that back. We can, now that that's why we've loosened that axle nut, so that we can really get the most out of that knuckle and get it out of the way. I'm going to just use a rubber mallet, tap that in. Almost there. And there we go. So if you're trying to line up the actual bolt, I use it's a long pry bar, but it's like a dowel long metal steel bar. Just make sure it's centered. That way I can try to center that bolt. Put the nut on, and I'm just putting it on finger tight. Still have to move this control arm around to center the other bolts. I just don't want it to fall out. All right, now that we have that back bolt just holding it there and it can pivot, I'm going to pull down on the ball joint side and guide this up inside that subframe. That's a pretty good start right there. And then I can take my mallet and give it a good couple of hits. See where it is. Now if we want that to seat up in, wiggle that axle around, bring that knuckle in. I like to take the actual ball joint pivot. Take your rubber mallet. And now you'll see that this will be a lot easier. Now I don't want to put a gun on that, just that, because I want to make sure that threads correctly. 21mm socket and a ratchet. See how it's not even catching? That's the difference between doing it wrong and doing it right, because if you get this to cross thread anyway, it's not going to be pretty. So I'm going to use the help of a pry bar to center that back. There we go. Now we know it started. Can't move it out. Gonna snug it because we are going to torque all of these. Now we can put our pinch bolt in for the ball joint. So this is the indent that I'm talking about. That's the stud of the ball joint. There's a little notch that cuts out and the bolt goes right in like that. So you'll be right in the center of that knuckle. That's where the pinch bolt will lie so that this doesn't pop out. So let's make sure it's lined up properly before you put the bolt in. All right, so I'm just going to use a mallet. And I can see that it lined up. This will not go through if that part's not lined up. So if you tap it and it doesn't go through, then bottom it out some more. Now we'll put the nut on. Start by hand. That's the 18 millimeter, and once again, we're just going to bottom it out because we will be torquing it to the factory specs. So the pinch bolt for the ball joint to the knuckle is 60 foot-pounds. So 18 millimeter wrench and socket, and away we go. Perfect. So the next bolt I'm going to torque is the forward bolt. So this is what we call the lower control arm forward bolt, and this would be the lower control arm rear bolt. So this one doesn't have a nut on the other side, it's part of the frame, and this one's 118 foot-pounds. A little add, because this is a steel bushing on the inside of that bushing, and the same with that one, we don't need to have the suspension leveled when tightening them. So the rearward control arm bolt is 135 foot-pounds. I'm going to put a 21 millimeter wrench on the top, and then my torque wrench on the bottom, 21 millimeter socket. Like I said, 135 foot-pounds. So now we're going to put the undercarriage shield back up, undo that bungee cord, bring this all up here. Okay, so I'm just going to put this side up first. I'll get the two plastic pins, put those in. I put the center pieces on. They line up, and then push them in, just like that. Now I'm going to put the 3 bolts in the front, line them up. I will not tighten them until they're all started. Put the center one in, and then one on the side here, the back. So now we're going to put the axle nut back on. Don't forget the washer goes first. Then I like to put it back on the same way I got it. Clean side of that nut, say to the rusted side, that would go in first. Definitely do it by hand because it's fine thread. Now we're not going to wail on this because inside here is a bearing that's pressed in that knuckle. And if you over tighten it, you will make that bearing wear out faster and you'll hear a howling sound. And you also don't want to leave it too loose. So the key is to snug it and then torque it to the manufacturer's specs. Once again, 32 millimeter socket. That's it. That's all I'm going to do. Now I'm going to torque it to the specs before I put the cap on. So how you have to do this, you have to stop this axle from spinning. You could put the tire on, take the center cap off, and then that way the weight of the vehicle. Obviously, if you don't have a long pry bar, that's the way to do it. But the wheel will have to come back off in order to put that cotter pin in. 180 foot-pounds is the wheel bearing torque for this castle nut. All right, so now we're going to put the lock spring on. It's a spring or for the cap. And you can see where the cotter pin lines up. So you want to try to line up any opening right in the center of it. Make sure it lines up as best as it can. There we go. Now we know this cap was rusted, so I'm going to have to tap it on. I'm just going to use a pry bar and a little hammer. And it is going to be spring loaded, so looks pretty clear. Let's see if we can get the cotter pin to go through. Perfect. We'll just take our cutters, take the long one, bring it around. And I just cut basically right where that knuckle goes, and I can fold it over. Start all the lug nuts by hand. That's the 19mm socket, and we will just snug them in a star pattern, and then we'll torque it to manufacturer's specs. Wheel torque on this vehicle is 100 foot-pounds for the lug nuts. Always do in a star pattern or crisscross. And then double check. When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.